Wanted to welcome everybody to our, I guess this would be one of our last scheduled webinars on the coach approach to adaptive leadership. Today's session is the coach approach, refining our questions. With that, we have our two presenters today, myself, Mark Durgan, unmute, and we also have Dwaneen Hicks. Welcome, Dwaneen.
Hello.
All right. So today is going to be a very great and interesting webinar because I think it really ties into some of the more challenging aspects with coaching, which is really how do we ask questions to truly open up conversations. And I think we're going to have some good insights. I did mute everybody, but I do invite anybody throughout the conversation just to unmute yourself, ask questions, kind of give thoughts and feedback related to kind of what we're talking about. If you have, like I said, if you have questions, if you have ideas or thoughts kind of where we're coming from, or just we put a question out there and it just doesn't sit right. We really want to know and understand that. So with that, I wanted to also, first and foremost, see if anybody wanted to possibly host us in our presence practice. And if not, I will be happy to do it. You can unmute yourself or put your hand up and we'll definitely unmute you. All right. Not seeing anybody jump. Maybe we're a little bit early in the call for that. So we try to practice and really do these presence practices in all of these sessions and all of these meetings, from our webinars to our coaching calls and learning circles. It's really about how we can kind of come into center, come into the environment that we're able to kind of understand each other, hear each other, and just be in the moment. So if you just invite everybody, if you like, just to lower your gaze and just start by taking some nice deep breaths. Just breathe in. And out. Breathe in and breathe in from your top of your chest. Really expand your chest. And as you're breathing, I invite you to think of a pleasant thought, a vacation, a loved one, a pet, kids, your parents. And just go back in time to a happy or just a joyful experience that you had. And as you're doing that, I want you to kind of feel how your body feels, how it feels sitting in your chair. The weight of yourself as it touches the chair, as your back rests. Feel the air on your skin. Take one or two more nice breaths. And as you're ready, I invite you to come back. All right. So like I said, today's webinar is really about asking kind of deeper questions and really understanding the types of questions that we ask. And as we get into that, what we really want to think about is taking a couple steps back and really thinking about the coach approach and the model that we really try to live by. First and foremost is the idea of being present. It's showing up equipped and aware. And the other big part of this is the ability to just listen. We're listening to understand, to acknowledge, and also to make sure that the other person knows that we are there listening. So if you really think about it, without presence, we can't really be there to listen. And as we kind of go into the idea of clarifying and reflecting, which is really checking your understanding, you can't do clarifying and reflecting without also incorporating the idea of presence and listening. Today, we're going to be really going into the asking good questions. And again, framing back to the idea of presence and listening. Listening not for what you want to hear, but listening to what's being said. Then we move into the idea of giving that feedback, strengthening others by giving that positive feedback, and strengthening others by giving that honest feedback. And then the idea of holding accountability. And if you remember from when you went through this course, the holding the accountability is not that idea of the supervisor, supervisee, holding that person accountable to your goal. It's really, as a coach, how we can hold the accountability for that individual's decisions that they're making. How can we support them in making and keeping those desired outcomes? And then lastly, like I said just a second ago, we're doing all of this, the holding accountability, the giving feedback, asking questions, the presence, listening, and clarifying. We're trying to live this on a day-to-day basis by modeling this behavior, by being present in meetings, by being a good listener, a listener that's listening to understand what's being said. So it's just a real quick refresher of the model and kind of why we do what we do. The idea, what we're looking at today, is really the purpose of good questions. When we ask questions, it's at the service of the person who we're working with that's having that challenging situation. It's the idea of that humble inquiry, the servant leadership. We really want to help others think about and through their problems. So by asking these questions, we're not asking questions to give them ideas to solve their problems. We're asking these questions so that they can become more powerful in their decision-making in their lives. So we want to help them and see the situation with more clarity. And that's really why we're asking questions. And that's why we sometimes ask the same question that may seem the same question worded just a different way. Sometimes by doing that, we can kind of really look at and have that person look at that situation in a little bit different environment or different light. Some people that have done the trauma training classes, it's the idea of seeing things through a different lens. So you see things through one lens, and then you change the hue, you change the prescription of the glasses, and you can kind of see things maybe a little bit different, a little bit more clearly. And then revealing the information and solutions to the coachee that we couldn't have seen before in the conversation. So by having these good questions, this information is going to come out. Solutions are going to come out that may not have ever been thought about. And that's really why we're asking these questions. When we're asking questions, we also kind of want to take a step back and think about some of the questions that we want to avoid. And these are questions that, and we'll go into this in a couple of slides, that are shutting down the conversation, okay? We're not asking questions that we know the answer to. And I think a lot of us, and I can speak for myself even, when I think about my time years ago when I was a probation officer working with juveniles, asking those questions that I knew the answer to allowed me to kind of prepare for what my response was going to be. And it also allowed me not to kind of open the door to something that was all of a sudden I wasn't going to be able to answer, or was going to be taken off guard. But the reality is, even if I would have asked those more deep questions or those questions I didn't know, I think everybody that we work with over time has a lot more skill sets than they really think about. So it's about challenging ourselves and really kind of diving deeper into our own expertise of the fields that we're in to really kind of know that we can ask these deeper questions. The other one is one of those classics, giving that advice in disguise. Kind of, have you thought about doing this? It's a question, kind of, but you're really suggesting where you want them to go. And then also, when we're not interested in the answer. So when we look at that previous slide, it's really about being of interest and service to that person. So if we're not interested in what the response is, it's very difficult to have a truly engaging conversation. And then lastly, asking why questions. Why don't you trust me? Why did you do that? When we think about those kind of questions, we're really kind of getting that person maybe on the more defensive level. And here's just a little chart of things where we have common questions in the left-hand side that might be on the more not ways that we want to approach this. So have you tried? And on the right-hand side is more of these coach approach questions. What have you tried? Opening the conversation. What could you try? And allowing that time for responses, allowing that time for silence when we ask questions. Silence is scary, but silence is also one of the best ways for a person to have that breakthrough. Putting your own perspective or values in a question. Isn't it scary that you have to go to court? Or isn't it bad what happened with your family? You're putting your values into that question. What we really want to do is kind of take that step back and say, how do you feel about that? Or what might you feel, how might you feel if that happens? Putting it back into the person, putting it back into how that person feels. And I think when we think about kind of this idea of how do you feel questions, how do you also sometimes feel as the questioner, as the person asking the questions? Do you have tightness in your chest? Is your jaw clenching up? Kind of those somatic activities. And how are you reacting to these questions? And are you being there and open for the person? And you can see the rest of them here. Why are you angry? Well, the person might not be angry, but you're perceiving that. So it's really about the question about how are you feeling, or you look like this, or especially when we're doing these virtual meetings, and if you have the opportunity to use your camera, you can see in that person's face, hey, I'm seeing something in your face that makes me think that you might be upset. Is that right? So really kind of thinking about how we're interacting with one another. Any questions on that so far? We are monitoring the chat too. So if you have questions or thoughts as you're kind of coming through this, please use the chat. Okay. So asking questions is really about how we solve issues. Most often we're asking questions to learn more about a situation. So that we can act or make a decision based off that information. These are really kind of what we might even consider time-limited questions. And maybe A and B questions. What you mean by A and B are a black and white question where there is a question and there's an answer. What time does the bus come? What do you want to eat? That one could be a vast variety of answers, depending on your relationships. But really it's about kind of when we're asking these questions, we want to learn, we want to decide, and then we want to act. And I think when I see the word we there, it's the we is you as the coach, and the we is also the person that you're coaching. Because really the objective is we do want to learn about each other, and then we do want to come up with some mutual decisions, and then we want to act. And when I say we want to act, hopefully it's the coachee that's acting, and then you're supporting in that accountability role. So when we think of questions, we're going to go into two parts of this. We're going to go talk about closing questions and opening questions. We call these types of questions that we're going to go over closing questions because they're very good at closing the conversation, making those movements towards a decision, making those movements towards an action. Closing questions are very useful in identifying needs and priorities, getting clarity, making decisions, and setting plans. So the closing questions in the coach approach, we're using the coach approach. It's often that we can default to some of these closing questions. What's your best option? What's your next step? When I put a question out, like, what's your best option? It's really about how I am closing the conversation down. I'm asking you for your best option. That option is number one in your list. And I'm not asking for other options. I say, what's your best? What can you commit to? I can commit to showing up on time to the next 5 meetings. Okay. So we've closed it. You've come to a commitment. Now we can come to that support piece. Even how can I support you can be a closing question. Closing questions are not necessarily bad, but you just have to realize that it's a closing of a conversation. It's a closing of a thought. Any questions on that?
Mark, it's Larissa. It makes me wonder, when you talk about closing questions, for those of us who are, continue to practice these skills, if maybe in the past or maybe in the present, we've used those closing questions to sort of guide the coachee along. And is there an appropriate time and space for that, that line of questioning?
What do you think?
Good question. I would say there very well may be a time and a space that is appropriate. And you as the coach need to be mindful about the questions that you're asking and whether it's the right time in the conversation for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's, as you're using these coaching skills and hopefully you're building these coaching relationships, when that person may be exhausted all of their kind of current options. When that it's that kind of right time to say, you know what, maybe we need to take a break. Let's close for now. But then you can also always give that opportunity to reopen. So I think the closing questions are not, they're good. But it's about understanding, is this a closing opportunity or is this an opening opportunity? And we're going to go into that. So if you only ask the closing questions, you might attempt to solve the wrong problem. So this is some of the challenges that we have with these closing questions. You can cut the conversation short. You can solve the current problem that is there, but not the one that's under the surface. You could be rushing into some bad decisions, preventing opportunities for the person to think and grow and develop as a professional. And sometimes you're no longer in service to the person you're coaching because maybe you're in a hurry and you're closing that question because you need that time. So I think it's about also having those conversations to talk about how this question is or where you're coming from as the coach. The converse of that is this idea of opening questions. So we open questions to offer the opportunities, explore new options and possibilities or ideas. So when we think about the previous slide, what's your best option? To say this in a more open way is, what other options can you see? It really allows you, that person, it almost gives them the permission to say there's more than one option. And a lot of times there are, especially in these conversations that we're talking about. What else have you tried? What else might you try? Who else needs to be part of this conversation? By saying that word else, you're inviting that opportunity for more interaction, more people to be part of it. Where else might you use what you've decided? Kind of thing. So really allowing these times and opportunities to really open up and move. So this is where the invitation comes from. You will be surprised and delighted by what people answer to these types of questions. It's really about allowing that person to explore, and especially when you're asking these open questions, is really allowing for that opportunity for silence, to let things sit. So when we think about opening and closing questions, like I said, there is a bit of a balance. There are great opportunities to close and there's great opportunities to open. So even in this slide, you can kind of see where the top part of this is your opening. What are your options? What might you need in order to move forward? How else might I support you? On the converse of it, what option do you think is best? Where can you get the things that you need? And what do you commit to? So when you think about the top, it's opening to possible multiple answers or multiple thoughts. The bottom is really about how we're trying to define and roll into a more solidified decision. Any questions on the first part of this this discussion? Any additional questions or thoughts? Because we're going to have a little bit of different speaker coming up in just a second. Joanine is going to take over. And I have a mystery keyboard here. All right, Joanine, I think you're up.
I am. So far, we've covered kind of the situation of what the person is going through. And now we're going to kind of switch over to those person-centered, because sometimes we overlook to ask the person about themselves and how they're feeling about the situation. It's almost, sometimes I think of it as when people explain the situation, they kind of put it out there. And it's sometimes our responsibility to kind of start asking more person-centered questions to bring them back into the situation and for them to understand where they fit into the situation that they're explaining. And so then we start to switch over from those situation-centered questions to more person-centered questions. And so we can switch to the next slide. So big person-centered questions and their purpose. So we were talking more about the situational, what do you see, what are the options in the situation? But here we'll start to ask those, like Mark was saying, some kind of thematic questions. How would you feel, if you achieve this goal? And if it's something that, they say, oh, I feel good about it. And you can, this is where we're paying attention to those cues, verbal cues, facial cues, all those different things. And if they say, I'd feel good about it, that's wonderful. But if they say something like, I guess it would be great, or should be fine, and you see the little shrug or kind of looking off and not a full commitment to it, then that gives you the opportunity to start asking, okay, for them, what are you feeling? Because I noticed that you didn't seem really excited about that. And then to give them the opportunity to explain their place and how they're feeling in the situation, even when they say something may be the goal that they want to achieve, but you don't really see that as being kind of it doesn't really close it. They still have something else going on there, and it gives you the opportunity to kind of explore what that is, and it can lead them to better options, that they may think of. And then how does the situation make you feel? Do they want to change it, change themselves? Like, what needs to happen? I had a client I was speaking with, and her issue that she was talking about was more about food and diet and how this contributes to weight loss, kind of things like that. And she made a statement basically asking herself, but it was her statement, why am I not good enough to make my own food? You know, she mentioned she's throwing away food every week because she'll just go buy food from somewhere else. And what clicked to me was, why am I not good enough to make my own food? So I asked the question, where did you hear that you weren't good enough? And, you know, make a long story short, it was something about a past relationship. But then my next question was very person-centered and very simple. How does your food taste to you? To which she responded immediately, delicious. And then I gave a moment because she was like, delicious. But then you watched her face change. And the next statement she made was, oh, it can't be that simple. And she went on to, and giving her the space to speak, she went on to say, my food is great to me. It was somebody else that said I wasn't good enough for it. And it kind of opened her up to see where the barrier was or what else was going on aside from just saying, I just can't make my own food. And it exposed something deeper. So asking that place of where she was helped to see the situation more clearly for herself and kind of get to the place that she needed to get to. So we'll go to the next slide. So when we talk about other considerations for good questions, in the between the situation focus and the person focus, because it's not necessarily an opposite, it's just a different angle. And so where we ask, you know, those situations, what might be the barriers to your plan? But then they ask, how are you feeling about this situation? Or how are you feeling about this plan? Because you can have a beautiful plan laid out that, you know, that you thinking up here is a great plan. But then when you ask how a person feels about it, they may not be as committed. And then it makes them open up and say, well, maybe that's not the best plan for me. Maybe I need to think of some other things that will work for me, not necessarily just for the situation. And then going on, you know, what resources do you need to make it happen? Or how might you want to show up to the future situations like this? Because in this, we remember Viktor Frankl had a quote, you know, he wrote, I forget the name of the book, but when we are no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. And so in these, when we ask about a situation, we can ask a person, how might you show up differently? Or how might you want to be if that situation can't change? If you don't have control over that situation, how do you show up differently? And then we move in more into those person-focused questions in situations like that. Any questions? Okay, we can move to the next slide. So that's the balancing of the 4 question types. So we were talking about the open, that gives you more toward possibilities, and closed more toward an action or certainty. But we were talking about our steps in the coach process when we're looking for what's your plan. And that's when we ask those more closing, you know, questions. What you'd like to do different, what you try first, how do I support you? And that's in a situation. But over when we're talking about person-centered, how does it make you feel? Very closed, just the one, because normally it's just, you know, just tell me how you feel. It's not like I'm opening up to tell me more about, you know, all these other feelings that may be going on, but how do you actually feel in that moment? And when we talk about the open, you know, person questions, what would it take to help you feel supported? And it kind of gives a person a moment to focus on themselves and then to say, what do they need? Not necessarily what does the situation need. What do they need themselves? Any questions on this graphic?
Not a question, Deneen, just a comment.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. What would it take to help? Oh, it went away. Oh, and now it's back. We have thunder here. I thought maybe, oh, goody. Where was I at? Oh, what would it take to help you feel supported? You know, I have caught myself at times, of course, I'm not afraid to say too much, but actually, you know, saying to a friend or family member, okay, so if I call with questions about this or I want to vent, because we are very big in my family about venting, you know, are you gonna be okay if I want to vent and say very bad things about that person until I get it out of my system. And, you know, we do that. I have 3 sisters, so you learn how to vent. You learn how to listen to other people vent. And most people won't ask, you know, they just won't go there. I'm always fascinated because, well, 4 women in adolescence, hormones everywhere, my mom in menopause, it could get very noisy in my house growing up. So my poor dad, that's all I can say is my poor dad. You know, I always find it really puzzling when people don't do that, but I like the fact that it's written right out there. And the other thing is, Mark, are we gonna be able to have these slides? There's a couple of them I'd like to tape up.
Absolutely. I can print out the slide deck in a larger form PDF. I did put the 3-slide panel, 3 slides per page in the chat. I think that was also emailed out to everybody. But yeah, we can absolutely make this the larger PDF as well.
Oh, good, because I've been taking pieces of it when opportunity presents and when I decide to present opportunity. To my teenager and some of her friends. And, you know, you plant a seed, drown it, and then try to make it grow, because in the long run, it'll help.
Thank you, Diana.
If I can just, I think one of the things that Diana really said that struck me, Dwaneen, was really about asking that permission to provide that piece of feedback or comment. Not just the assumption that I can because I can, but really about opening up the conversation to say, can I state this, or can I give you my true and honest opinion? It just, I think for me, it just opens the door for the person to at least kind of know what might be coming.
I agree.
I think we would all be a lot better off in this world if we permitted each other to vent, because we build all this stuff up inside of us and then we fume, you know, like a volcano that needs to just explode and get over itself. And we just keep building it up, and it just makes, it's like a swamp.
Diana, can I ask a question? So if you were really kind of acting in that coach piece, what might the questions, or how might you really interact or ask those questions about a person says, I want to vent to you?
How would I answer it?
What might you, how would you answer that?
Oh, I would say yes. And this is my role for people who vent. This is my personal. If you want to vent, you can say anything you want as long as it doesn't have anything to do with Homeland Security. I will tell no one. And it helps that I have short-term memory loss. And I have this ability to just forget things easily that don't fall into my range of being real important. And I vent. People vent. I vent about my husband pretty frequently. Doesn't mean I don't love him. Today is our 38th anniversary. And I just think you let people know that there are rules to venting and what your rules are, so that they can safely vent. And they don't have to worry about you, you know, heading for the phone or the water cooler, I guess, if anybody works in an office anymore. So that's how I do it. That's how my family does it. Even if it's about our sisters. There's a lot of that.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because I think what I really heard from that is you understood your role in that.
Yeah. So, absolutely. Sometimes people will just, like, I have a friend who will just call me up and she will just, blah, you know, and there it is. She's just exploding all over the place. And whenever she takes a breath, I will say, you're venting, right? Yes. Oh my gosh, you know, and off she goes again. And I just chuckle to myself because, I mean, we've known each other 40 some years. So she knows I'm not going to tell anybody anything. she already knows how it works with me. So, and I wasn't kidding. I don't tell anybody. Everybody needs to feel they have someone that they can safely say, even if it's, oh, your mother's going to drive me nuts. Baby, I'm right there with you. Go vent.
Mark, you know what this makes me think about? This is Ellen. I'd like to just offer something. The vision of the coach approach is this opportunity to change conversations. And I'm listening to Diana and I'm just sort of smiling because one of the reasons I think I sometimes need to vent is because I feel like people have not listened to me, and it just builds up and builds up and builds up, and then I need to vent. So I just wanted to put the little vision back into our dream here that we want to learn. I would like to learn how to change the conversations in so many spaces that I'm in. And Diana, one of the outcomes might be that we reduce our need for venting. And that would
be great.
All right. So I
That
just
would be
wanted
great.
to.
But just
Right.
remember, every furnace needs a vent, every air conditioner. There is a lot in our world that
Yeah.
you just, if you know how to, you must know how to vent correctly.
Yeah. So I just thought
I'm right there with you if there's a way to
Right.
reduce the angst.
Well, it's so interesting, Diana, you're using the language of vent and what that even means. I mean, this is the sort of thing that you can get in your coaching conversation is venting is giving space, right? So the idea that we all need to vent, really underneath of that is we all need a space and a place to be really seen. And also hearing, Diana, a shift in what you said from we all need to vent, and then when the idea on the table is what if we didn't need to vent as much, you immediately were like, oh, this would be great, right?
Yeah.
So something maybe to be curious about, and in terms of our relationships or how we treat each other, is how can we support people in being there and seeing them and giving that space so that there's no buildup that requires that ventilation.
Well,
You know what I
one of
mean?
the things that often happens, and this is when it becomes not a healthy vent, is somebody's working with Jane Doe and there are constant problems. And so, the coworker comes over and vents to, somebody she knows she can't, but then it keeps happening and keeps happening. That's whenever, you've got to call us, okay, I'll stop. That's whenever you've got to double back and really look at what's going on and sit down with that person and say, and go through, a lot of these would work beautifully. That's where you absolutely have to address it. You can't just keep venting. In most situations, I think that can be done. In all of them, oh please, we're human beings. No, I mean,
Sure.
Let's face it. It is not always going to happen. This isn't nirvana. But I think there are times, and it's almost like there's like no number, like, okay, after the fourth time. It's more like you feel it, you sense it, your gut tells you, okay, this is going to be an every Thursday thing unless we start looking at something differently. So, and that's when you start
Right.
working.
And I want to
And I would say,
yeah. I just want to bridge
sorry,
that
Alex.
briefly. Yeah, I'll just bridge that briefly to James's comment about it can be a compliment if your staff vents to you because that means you feel comfortable with you and they don't fear expressing with you. And I agree. It's great to be trusted and to feel trusted. And if somebody's letting off steam to you and you have that relationship with them, by all means, absolutely, that's a positive thing. And I think, Diana, what I'm hearing you say is maybe there's an opportunity for those relationships to change with the people that they're either complaining about or they're frustrated about or they're having issues with in one form or another, that through coaching you can be able to help them with. So you're still there as a trusted confidant and ear. And if the pattern is that they're venting all the time, then maybe there's a way to make a change and make a shift. What were you going to say, Dwaneen?
I'm just agreeing that this is the exact situation when we talk about a coach approach to these situations, and this is where we're building those skills. So when someone is venting, and if we notice the pattern, to be able to ask some questions and to be able to assist this person to see, maybe, is there a better way? Is there a different way? Not better or worse, but a different way to go about these things and giving them that space. So I appreciate this is a conversation. And I also I know that Marty had a question asking, are we supposed to use open and closed questions, or are closed questions less valuable? I think all of the questions are valuable, open and closed. It's in using our judgment of which one in the situation is going to be the most helpful and most in service to the person that we're speaking with. Because if we get to a place where it's like, okay, we've talked a pretty good amount on this, and now we're kind of moving toward that, okay, so what are we going to do? What do you want to do about that? Then we go move into those closed questions. But if it's something that needs more thought and kind of get that critical thinking going, then we would use those open questions to kind of pull more information for the person that we're speaking with. Does that answer your question? Okay.
And I think, Dwaneen, the other opportunity that we have, because I see that Ron's response was about 90% open and 10% closed. The other opportunity that we have is, even if we ask a closed question and we just kind of feel like all of a sudden you see something that maybe is still there, reframe it. Ask it again, but ask it more open. Say, did I kind of cut you down there, or did I kind of cut you off in your train of thought? Let's reframe that a little bit. So just because we ask a closed question doesn't mean it's closed forever. Back to you.
Okay. So which are the powerful questions? Powerful questions emerge naturally from listening well and using all question types. And for us, is noticing where a person's thoughts tend to go. Powerful questions, the statement seems like there's like this list of amazing questions to ask. And as you heard in my story, sometimes it's the most simple question that gets to that powerful answer, or that breakthrough, excuse me. So we're asking questions off of what we hear, what we observe, where the person has their motivation to go. And so we ask the questions in service to that, and then they become powerful in how they take that person, whatever path that person decides to take with those questions. So it's not necessarily, the list of 1 to 25 best coaching questions to ask. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what's the most powerful question to be in service to the person that we're trying to help. So make sure they have time to answer, and let "I don't know" be an acceptable answer for an engaged participant. And I think this is something important to note, because sometimes a person actually doesn't know. And if we're in a coaching relationship, it doesn't have to be, answered right here, right now. But is this something that this person needs to maybe take some time to think about? And if they say, "I don't know," give them that grace and that space to say, okay, well, is it something that you want to think about? Or this is something to tuck away and think about, as you move along. And then if we talk again on this subject, then maybe you have more that we can talk about in that arena. But it's just giving space. And for us, it's to remain curious. For us, it's always to be wondering. If we're listening intently and we're really listening to understand, then those questions will come to us to say, well, tell me more about X, or where's this going? And kind of letting your coachee take you on that journey. And your curiosity will assist them in going down that path, their path. So their good thinking is more important than our good questions. And as long as if you can see this person is really working through what they're trying to work through, it's not necessarily a case of what was that one question I had to ask. It's more, where are we right now? What do I need to ask in order to move this person on to the next step? And then the next slide. So other tips, excuse me. Don't forget to clarify and reflect before asking your questions to ensure that you're hearing what's really going on. That's when, we used to reflect back and sometimes, and listen for that, no, not really. And then listen to what comes next as that clarifies for you kind of where you want to go with your next question. Ask not just about a task, but about them, their thoughts, feelings, and family. Again, this is moving more from that situation centered to the person-centered questions and asking their place in the situation and then their surrounding, other things they have to consider within this situation. And getting them to pull in all the variables to have a full understanding of what the issue is. Ask questions that keep control of the coaching conversation in their hands as much as possible. Again, this is about being in service to the person you are speaking with, not to yourself. And ask questions about how they want you to support them. So it's not necessarily, I can support you in this way. You want to hear what they need, not necessarily what you need. And then have the conversation about how you can help them and how you can be supportive in the ways that they need. And then remember to follow up. When we say accountability, we're saying, what can we do? Is it a phone call to say, hey, how are you doing with this? Is it something that you all made an agreement of how you would support them and hold them accountable to what they want to do? And so just remember, in this relationship, it is a relationship, and they made a commitment to what they want to change, and you've made a commitment to support them. So remember your commitment in assisting them in their accountability. And so now we wanted to kind of open up a little bit of conversation about how we can take this forward. We put 3 areas here that we were considering of how we want to think about how this connects to systems of care. Where can we practice asking these different questions in our lives? Excuse me, it's not necessarily a place where it's not always just work related. Sometimes it's a situation that is non-work related, but it's affecting work. And so kind of having those conversations and asking, so I'm asking you all, what other places can we practice these kind of tools and, skills in other areas that still are assisting? It still helps. It's not necessarily just work. And then what's your reaction to this material that we've had here today? Is it exciting? Is it daunting? What are you all thinking about this? So a little discussion. Want to hear what you all think.
Hi, everyone. This is Melody.
Hi, Melody.
Hi. I hope everyone is doing well. The material is exciting to me. I do use the coach approach in my personal life quite a bit. Of course, I use it in my work life, but in my personal life. But what I'm feeling right now is that we're not, when I say we, I'm talking about my son and I, we're not in a place where I'm able to practice it well with him, because he's not in a good space. And I've had difficulty, I guess, asking those powerful questions that could make something, happen. I don't know. But so using it in my personal life has always been something I've done. And it's exciting because I think that what we talked about today, and unfortunately I was on another Zoom. So I came in a little later. So I missed the beginning, but I have been reading over the material prior to the meeting, this meeting. It's exciting to me because it takes the coach approach a bit further and a bit deeper in practice. So I do want to perfect what was shared today and begin to use that in at times that I can, that I think, you know, I can apply it. But I'm excited about it. I just think it's gonna be that much more helpful to myself and to others.
Mhm.
And I have to practice coach approach with myself. I have to practice being present with me, especially
Mhm.
through this quarantining and COVID. I have had to practice that and get comfortable with that. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mhm.
I don't know. Something's going on with my tablet. I can't even see the screen. So let me know if you're not hearing me. I really enjoy the coach approach and all of coming in on this virtual call. Just before entering in the call, I had supervision with one of my staff. And right now, with what's going on, the climate of all of what's going on, being able to support clients who are experiencing more than the pandemic, people who are experiencing the racial injustice, all of the things that are going on in regards to that. And so getting my staff to even be curious enough or feel comfortable enough to ask the questions around how people might be feeling and coping during this time. So I think that this call here was right on time because it further supports when I'm telling my staff to be curious and ask questions.
Absolutely. And it is that I love how you spoke on is asking those questions of people who you may not have gotten the answer before because you didn't understand it wasn't in service to you, it's in service to them. So it's asking, you know, how do you feel? How's this making you feel? And getting them to open up about that. It is so important right now. So thank you for sharing that. I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of tie into that for a second. I mean, what I really heard was that is really kind of providing that opportunity for the staff to be safe and seen. That idea that you are there to support them, to be there for them, and to really kind of make them feel like they have something to go to and someone to talk to. And that's really what this a lot of this coaching is about, is that idea of feeling safe, feeling seen, and being able to kind of talk. I think it's just a great way that you're using that. So I congratulate you.
Thank you.
If I could piggyback on that, in March, because I have the family member committee under the Department of Behavioral Health in Philly, and I had my meeting, and it was just at the time that it was to stay at home, and my family members were like all over the place, and so I mean, really, you know, the kids were home. There were no lessons, no therapy, nothing had really fallen in place yet. So I let my supervisor know. I said, I can't do this once a month. I have to do this every week. So since then, I've been doing my meeting every week to support the parents and just give them that space and asking the questions, getting them to see that most of them had the answers, but they were just that frustrated that, you know, they couldn't take that moment to just think certain things through. So that's been extremely helpful. And then having presenters come and speak from the school board and different things where, you know, to answer those questions that I couldn't answer, or I may not have had the information. So that's been extremely helpful. And using the coach approach and being present and asking the right questions has I mean, really been, has helped out. It has been really, I don't know what the word I want to use, but, and then the committee has grown immensely. We're coming up like close to 40 parents now. So,
Congratulations.
yeah, that are consistently coming. You know, I have about 85 or 90 that are on my distribution list, but I have maybe 50% now are really coming consistently. So I'm going to keep it up as long as I can. It is a lot. because there are a lot of everybody's Zooming, and so we're, Zooming all the time now. So, but yeah, so it's been extremely helpful. So I just wanted to piggyback on what, where did she go? I forgot her name. But anyway, I wanted to piggyback on what she had said. So it's been helpful with the parents. And also that's a way of connecting it to the systems of care. And is actually what we are going to do, what we are going to launch at some point, and it looks like virtually we'll have to start, is what we're calling community councils. And so we're starting in 3 communities. So this work is going to be, extremely powerful. It's taken to the communities now to work with community members, connecting them to resources and teaching some skills and letting them go.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Mhm.
I do want to note we are coming right up on time, so I want to respect everybody's time and thank everyone for coming today and being a part of this discussion. You see, Mark has put up our next learning circle is scheduled for Thursday, July 30th at 2, and you can register there. I think, Mark, are you going to send this out as well?
Yeah, I'll be sending that out, but I did put it in the chat. So you can go to the chat and actually click right on the link and get ahead of everybody else. Remember, so these learning circles are not webinars. It really gives us the opportunity to practice and really kind of dive into the skills, individual or duo or even like a trio basis. So it's a great opportunity to use the skills. I also put in the chat a PDF, which really helps define the coach approach and system of care as kind of almost an integrated model of thinking. And thanks to our great friend and mentor, Ellen Kagan, and her work with Gary Blau, who used to be the head of the Children's Bureau for SAMHSA, he actually really helped us redefine and restate some of this. So it was a great help to Gary for putting in his red lines everywhere. It was a pleasure to take those edits. So I think it's a nice, strong document that, especially if you're trying to think about this in the system of care approach, I think it really helps explain it. So, all right. So with that, I thank you. I thank you for joining and talking today. And we'll have this posted up in the next couple of days on the website. I put the link of where that'll be, including we'll have the large font or large single page PDF of the presentation there as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, everybody. Thanks, Dwayne.
So great to see everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I can't find it.